environment or financial services, right across the economy. And that is, to me, our ambition, to grow the economy, to make working people better off, and to make our country and our economy more competitive. So next week, the new growth forecast will be published by the Office of Budget Responsibility. But this is just one of a range of measures, along with the planning and infrastructure bill that was published last week, the pensions bill, which is coming soon, to turn around the lacklustre growth performance that has affected the UK for far too long. Well, if you look at what the OECD have done today, they have downgraded most major economies' growth forecasts. The UK is not immune from those global headwinds. But if you look at the forecast for next year for the UK, we're forecast to be the second fastest growing economy in the G7. That is up from the third fastest the last time they published their forecasts. But if you're asking, am I happy with those numbers? Of course not. I want to see the UK economy create more jobs, create more prosperity, to lift the living standards of working people.
As Rachel Reeves prepared for what seemed like just another political debate, she felt a sense of confidence that only comes with familiarity. As the Labour Party's Chancellor, she had faced these kinds of situations before, defending her party's policies and offering strong, well-rehearsed responses to any criticism. The topic was set to be Labour's economic record, and Reeves knew exactly how to handle it. Her talking points were clear. She would emphasise the strides Labour had made in rebuilding the economy after years of austerity, promoting stability and growth, and laying out the groundwork for future prosperity. She had polished answers at the ready, each response designed to deflect any attacks and paint her party's economic strategy in the best possible light. With her academic background in economics, including a master's degree and experience at the Bank of England, she was prepared to show the public that her expertise made her the ideal leader to steer the nation's finances. Yet, as the debate kicked off, it quickly became clear that this wouldn't be an ordinary exchange of ideas. Reeves, fully expecting a routine back and forth, found herself facing an opponent who wasn't interested in the usual political dance. Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, stepped onto the stage with a different agenda. Farage had studied the Labour narrative inside and out and was ready to dismantle it piece by piece. His challenge was not just about disagreeing with her policies, but exposing the very foundation of her claims, forcing Reeves into an uncomfortable position from the outset. What was supposed to be a controlled, professional debate soon spiraled into a battle for her credibility.
So the economic figures today show we're all getting poorer again, and we're led by the most incompetent Chancellor in history, Rachel Reeves, and there are some very big questions. She said she worked for 10 years at the Bank of England, turns out it was 5.5. Said she was an economist at the Bank of England, turns out she was in customer service. And on expenses, well, she had very big problems when she worked for a bank, and as a Member of Parliament, had her credit card taken away.
As the debate progressed, Rachel Reeves quickly realised that this wasn't going to be the usual political sparring. Farage, known for his sharp and unrelenting style, wasted no time in striking at her most vulnerable point: her credentials. He immediately called out her claim of having worked at the Bank of England for a decade, pointing to official records that contradicted her statement, revealing that her tenure was far shorter, only 6 years. Farage's directness caught Reeves off guard. She stammered, trying to clarify, but her words only seemed to dig her deeper into a hole. "I worked at the Bank of England for 6 years, between 2000 and 2006, including time at the British Embassy," she explained, visibly rattled, but the damage had already been done. Farage's challenge wasn't just about her resume. It was a clear sign to the audience that if she could exaggerate her own career, what else might she be misleading them about? The atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically. Reeves, who had been prepared to present herself as an expert on economic matters, now appeared defensive and vulnerable. Farage's relentless questioning chipped away at the polished image she had so carefully built. The more she tried to explain herself, the more her credibility seemed to falter. Farage wasn't simply questioning the facts, he was making a statement about trust, and for the first time in the debate, Reeves appeared unsure of her footing. The audience could feel the tension, and it became increasingly clear that the narrative she had planned was unraveling. Farage was not just playing politics, he was tearing down her entire defense with surgical precision.
Inflation. Now, you've got to be 40 years old to even know what the word means, because it kind of disappeared, but it's back. What is inflation? Well, I'll tell you. It's a disease of money, and it's caused by government. we have seen, since the beginning of this pandemic, vast money creation by government. In America, it's amazing to think, 28% of all dollars in circulation have been produced since 2020. It's mind-blowing. So what it means is we have more money in the system chasing the same number of goods and services. And surprise, surprise, that leads to shortages. I noticed there was no diesel at my local station this morning. And of course it leads to a rise in prices. And yet, one of the things that has amazed me over the last couple of years is how little central banks, politicians, governments understand about the problem that they themselves have helped to create.
As Farage continued to press, the focus of the debate shifted away from personal attacks and moved toward Labour's economic record, a topic that had long been a cornerstone of Rachel Reeves' political identity. With precision and a steady hand, Farage launched into a detailed analysis of the country's struggling economy under Labour's stewardship. He came prepared with undeniable facts and figures, statistics that exposed the economic failures Labour had attempted to gloss over. Inflation was climbing steadily, squeezing working-class families, and tax hikes, despite promises to the contrary, were becoming a heavy burden on small businesses and everyday Britons. Farage didn't just present abstract numbers, he had real-life examples that painted a vivid picture of the crisis. He referenced small business owners struggling to keep their doors open, pensioners who were facing increasing hardships with no relief in sight, and families who were watching their costs skyrocket while wages stagnated. As Reeves scrambled to defend her party's actions, Farage's message was clear. Labour's policies weren't just ineffective, they were actively hurting the people they had promised to protect. She tried to respond, clinging to the usual talking points, blaming past governments and the global economic climate, but Farage wasn't buying it. He cut through her defences with ease, pointing out that other countries were managing inflation and economic struggles more successfully, and questioned why the UK was still lagging under Labour's leadership. With every attempt to deflect, Reeves found herself sinking deeper into a quagmire of contradictions. Her usual polished responses seemed out of place, disconnected from the reality that Farage was exposing. As the debate raged on, it became increasingly clear that her ability to defend Labour's economic strategy was evaporating before the audience's eyes. Farage's relentless pressure was breaking down the carefully constructed narrative she had relied on.
Thank you very much and good morning everybody. Well, as Zira said, we've had a very busy, active and I think pretty successful 7 months. The speed, the growth and the breadth of the party has been pretty astonishing. I have to say my main priority since July the 4th has been the 1st of May. Because the 1st of May is our first real electoral test since the general election, where we intend to prove that the polls are not virtual, but that they are real. So a huge amount of work has got into it, and the political opportunity is, I think, pretty extraordinary. Labour have not exactly got off to a very good start. And even if the Prime Minister is able to use his Brexit freedoms to stand much taller on the world stage than he would have done as he...
The debate had taken a sharp turn, and now Rachel Reeves found herself cornered, struggling to hold on to the narrative she had so carefully prepared. Farage, sensing her vulnerability, pushed further, targeting Labour's economic promises. Reeves had spent months telling the public that her party was steering the country towards stability and growth. But Farage was now unmasking those claims as nothing more than empty rhetoric. He brought up the stark realities of Labour's policies: rising inflation that was eating into people's savings, tax hikes that were hurting the very working-class voters Labour claimed to represent, and a business environment stifled by over-regulation. Farage didn't just stop at broad strokes, he dove deep into the details, pointing out how businesses were folding under the weight of new restrictions and how families were struggling to make ends meet. The audience, once receptive to Reeves' arguments, could now feel the shift. Farage, with a calm but devastating precision, illustrated how Labour's policies were doing the opposite of what they promised. They were failing to protect the vulnerable, and instead they were worsening the very problems they claimed to address. As Farage's questions landed one after another, it became apparent that Reeves had no solid defense. She had been expecting an ordinary political exchange, but now she was forced to confront the truth. Her party's promises didn't hold up. Each time she attempted to deflect by blaming external factors, Farage swiftly countered with data that contradicted her. At that moment, Reeves was no longer a confident spokesperson for Labour's economic strategy. She was a politician scrambling to justify a failing system, and the more she tried, the more exposed she became. The weight of her party's failure pressed down on her, and the confidence she once had was slipping away with every word.
They realised inflation was happening. They said, don't worry, it's merely transitory. And now that the official inflation rate has hit 7%, but perhaps more significantly, the retail price index, which is how we used to measure it, has hit 9.9%, way the highest for 30 years and heading towards the highest in 40 years. And even though we've got to that level, I still genuinely don't think that our political class understand what the impact of this is actually going to be. Now look, politicians, TV presenters, those that are well paid, they cannot, in my opinion, fully understand, because they're out of touch with the impact of this on millions of folk. They're out of touch with the fear that many people are going through right now. And I say this because the first utility bills from Q1 are beginning to land on people's mats, and people are...
As the debate neared its climax, the pressure on Rachel Reeves intensified. Farage, relentless and sharp, turned his attention to Labour's broken promises, and this time he went for the jugular. He reminded the audience of Labour's pledge not to raise taxes on working families, an assurance they had made repeatedly during their campaign. Yet, under Reeves' leadership, taxes had quietly risen, and the very families Labour claimed to protect were now bearing the brunt of these increases. Farage didn't just make accusations, he backed them up with hard evidence. He pulled out figures showing the growing tax burden on middle-class Britons, the strain on small businesses struggling to stay afloat, and the higher costs that families had to absorb. It wasn't just about the economy anymore. It was about trust. Reeves, already visibly rattled, tried to argue that tax hikes were necessary for long-term economic stability, but her attempts to justify the actions of her party sounded hollow. The more she spoke, the more the audience could sense her desperation. Farage, undeterred, pushed her further. "Rachel," he said, his tone almost mocking, "you promised to protect the people who matter most, but your policies have made life harder for them. How do you explain that?" Reeves stammered, struggling to offer a coherent response. She was trapped, unable to provide the clear answers the public needed. As the debate raged on, it became painfully clear. Farage had won, and Reeves had nothing left to say. She had been exposed as the face of Labour's failure, unable to defend her party's economic record, and the silence that followed was deafening.
Just how big the impact is going to be on jobs and the economy once the budget takes full effect on April the 1st. So we have a chance and an opportunity there. As for the Conservatives, well, of course, on May the 1st, they're going to be defending hundreds of seats that they won in 2021, when they were right at the absolute peak of Boris Johnson's then success. But the level of betrayal to so many voters who voted Conservative back in 2019 has been such that the party now stands, frankly, for nothing. It serves no particular purpose.
The aftermath of the debate was nothing short of catastrophic for Rachel Reeves and the Labour Party. As the dust settled, the full extent of her humiliation became apparent. The media, eager to capitalise on the dramatic turn of events, exploded with coverage, dissecting every moment of the debate. Headlines blasted across TV screens and newspapers with phrases like "Labour's economic credibility shattered" and "Reeves exposed for lies dominating the news cycle." The public was relentless, and social media became a virtual battleground, with clips of Reeves' faltering performance spreading like wildfire. Memes mocking her inability to defend her own policies flooded platforms, and public opinion quickly shifted. Labour supporters who had once backed Reeves were now questioning her competence. For many, it wasn't just about the debate performance. It was the sense of betrayal that stung the hardest. The promises Labour had made to tackle the cost of living crisis and support working families now seemed like empty rhetoric. In the following days, internal Labour communications were in turmoil. Senior party figures, including some once loyal MPs, began privately calling for a reassessment of Reeves' position. Behind closed doors, whispers grew louder about her potential resignation. Pressure mounted on Keir Starmer, whose failure to prepare Reeves properly for the debate was now being questioned. With approval ratings plummeting, the Labour leader's grip on his party's future began to weaken. Some even speculated that this moment, this single catastrophic failure, might mark the beginning of Labour's downfall. For Rachel Reeves, the nightmare, the fallout would follow her for weeks, perhaps even months, as her credibility and Labour's reputation crumbled under the weight of her disastrous performance. See you later.